Hello and welcome back to another AHT Cloud training series. In this course, we will cover custom WebSocket implementation using the Laravel framework. We will not be using any third-party vendors. We will use our own server to handle all the WebSocket communications. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to stay up to date with my latest training videos. The first part of the course, I will explain what WebSockets are and how they work. Then we will build a sample chat application. This is not a front-end course, so I will not be focused on aesthetics, but rather on how to establish a two-way communication system between your server and your user devices. Here's a quick demo of what we're going to be building. So I have my application open on two browsers. For the first one, I'm going to connect using my name. And here, I'm just going to connect without anything. I can send a message, so let's send an example message. And you can see on both browsers, we see the message without refreshing our page. And let's try here. And you can see here, I did not enter my name, so it shows as anonymous. WebSockets is basically an API that lets you establish a two-way communication system in real time between a user device and your server. A user device can be, for example, the user browser or their mobile phone or anything that can connect to your server. A great example is a chat application. Let's say one of your users has his mailbox open on his browser and someone sent him a message. Then we don't really want that user to keep refreshing their browser to get those updates. Rather, we want to do it without having them to refresh their browser. Connecting to WebSockets is very similar to how you would connect with HTTP requests. To make an HTTP request on a server, it's usually done through ports 80 for HTTP and ports 443 for HTTPS. WebSockets use a very similar but different protocol. To make a WebSocket request, instead of using HTTP, you would use WS, usually on port 6001. The HTTPS equivalent is WSS, and you can do that on ports 443. Pusher channels is a popular hosted WebSocket solution. Instead of building your own WebSocket server, you can use theirs for a certain price. In this course, we will learn how to implement our own WebSocket server instead. It's free, very easy to do, and gives you full control of your system. Beyond Code Laravel WebSockets is a package designed for Laravel 5.7 and up. It can be used as a pusher replacement. This means you can still take advantage of using Laravel's pusher configuration and pusher SDK files without using their servers. This can get you up and running with WebSockets real quick. I have already prepared my project on Vagrant Homestead. If you don't know how to set up your local environment, I suggest you watch my previous tutorial on how to set up your local environment. I am using Homestead, so I'll show you my Homestead configuration file. So you can see here, I configured this domain to be our local host. I am using PHP 8.1. To create a Laravel project, I am going to be using Composer. So what you have to do is run Composer, create project, and this is for Laravel/Laravel, and I want to create it in my current directory here. Once that's done, it should look something like this. Now let's go ahead and create ourselves a new database. I am using Heidi SQL as my database client. So in here, I'm going to create a new database and let's call it Chat App. And I'm going to be adding this to my env file. Let's go ahead and open the code on Visual Code or whatever editor you're using. And in here, we're going to go to our env file and we're going to be configuring our database connection. So I'm connected using my Homestead. My database name was Chat App. My username is Homestead. and my password is secret. We will be using a queue to process our events. I recommend you use something like Redis for your queue driver. If you don't have Redis set up, you can just use your database instead. Inside your env file, you should have a variable called queue connection. I'm going to change this to database. If you're using your database as a queue driver, then you will need to create a new database table to hold all your jobs. Let's go back to our terminal. To create our new table, we can just use the Laravel built-in command, which is PHP artisan queue table. And this will create a new jobs table for us. So let's go back to our code. And if you go to database, migrations, then you should be able to see that you have create jobs migration here. And you can see it creates you a jobs table. Let's go back to our terminal and let's go ahead and run our migrations. Before we install Laravel WebSocket package, let's go ahead and find the documentation for it. I want you to search for Beyond Code WebSockets. And in here, you should see the first result, Beyond Code or beyondcode.de. And in here, you should have installation instructions. To install Laravel WebSockets, there is 4 things we need to do. We're going to install it through Composer. Then we're going to publish the migration files. Then we're going to run our new migration files. Then we will need to publish also the WebSocket configuration file. Let's go ahead and install the Laravel WebSocket package. And to do that with Composer, you run Composer require beyond code /Laravel-WebSockets. Once that's done, let's go ahead and publish our migration. We're gonna copy this chunk of code and let's paste it in our terminal. And we're gonna run PHP artisan migrate. And the last step is we're gonna publish our configuration file. Once that's done, then you should be able to see here that you have a new configuration file. It's copied from this location to your config folder. It's called websockets.php. Don't worry about it yet. We will cover it in a bit. To install Pusher's PHP SDK, we will need to use Composer. So we have to run Composer require pusher/pusher-php-server. Now we're going to run our queue and our WebSocket server. To run the queue on one terminal, you want to run PHP artisan queue work. To run the WebSocket server, you will need to open another terminal and you'll need to run PHP artisan WebSockets serve. So far, we have installed Pusher PHP server to run locally on our server. And we also installed the Laravel WebSockets package. Now let's go ahead and configure our application to work with our WebSocket server. Let's go to our env file and let's scroll all the way down. Here you should see your Pusher app ID, Pusher app key, secret, and cluster. So for all these values, instead of using the actual Pusher server, we're just going to use ours. So here you can write staging. And this can be any valid string. All right. Now we need to make sure that our broadcast driver right here is set to Pusher. And to be consistent, let me just copy this and paste it here alongside the other Pusher variables. And let's go ahead and add 2 more variables. Laravel WebSockets host and Laravel WebSockets port. And this port is going to be 6001 for The WebSocket host, it's going to be your IP address, so your local host. If you're running it on localhost, I am using Vagrant Homestead, so I'm running my project on a virtual machine. So I'm gonna have to use my IP address. If you're using the same setup as me, then you should be able to find your IP address inside your Homestead YAML file. And now we're going to configure our broadcast file. So this is where we're gonna configure our Laravel application to run with our WebSocket server. So you wanna go to config, and you should be able to find a file called broadcasting.php. And here we have a pusher option. This is what we wanna be modifying. So the driver should be pusher, and the key, secret, and app ID is all coming from our environment variables that we set, which was staging. For the options, let's go ahead and set the use TLS to false. So we want to set scheme to HTTP, and we want to add the curl options. So for the curl options, we're gonna add the curl option, so OPT underscore SSL verify host. And we want to set this to 0. This is just so we can run this locally. We want to also do the same thing, but for the verify peer. So in the last here, we're going to change the host to peer. Now let's go ahead and add our WebSocket host and port variables. So I'm just going to copy cluster, copy it 2 times. And for the first one, we're going to need our host variable, which is your Laravel WebSockets host. And we're gonna also need to do the same thing, but for the port. So let's add it here. This should be pretty much it for our broadcasting.php file. The Beyond Code Laravel WebSockets package that we installed comes with a dashboard that you can use to monitor your WebSocket connections. To access your dashboard, we're gonna go to config, and inside here, we're gonna scroll down and you're gonna find a file called websockets.php. And here, you can set your custom configuration for your dashboard. We will cover this in a bit, but for now, let's just scroll to path. So you need to find this variable path. And here you can see the path is Laravel WebSockets. So you want to open your browser, and let's go ahead and open our project. And you want to go to this path that we copied, and you should be able to see your WebSockets dashboard here. As of now, we have not configured our dashboard, so connecting to our WebSockets is not going to work. But I want to show you how to handle or debug errors when it comes to connecting with WebSockets. On this page, I'm going to open Developer Tools. If you're using Windows, you can just use Control-Shift-I, and I'm going to go to Network. And let's try to connect. So it's saying that channel current state is disconnected, and it did not work. So here you see we have a status 101. Let's go back to our WebSockets configuration file. We want to set the dashboard configuration here. So we want to set the port and the host. If you remember, inside our env file, we made the 2 variables, Laravel WebSockets port and host. Let's go ahead and copy this, and we want to set that inside our WebSockets file. So here, under port, let's add our host. Now let's scroll down and let's configure our app. So in here, our ID is set to the pusher app ID, which is correct. The app name is also coming. These are all coming from our env file, is the app name here. The key is also set inside our env file, which is staging. Secret path, we have also capacity. So let's copy the port and the host from here, and let's also add it to our apps variable. So I'm gonna add it on top of everything. Now let's go ahead and add a new variable, and this is just for our development purposes. You should not enable this in production, but let's say encrypted is set to false. Now remember, any change you make inside your WebSockets file or any change you make for your WebSockets, it's not going to reflect until you restart your WebSocket server. So let's go back to our terminal where we had the WebSockets running. So here we need to exit this. So Control C, and let's go ahead and run it again. So PHP artisan WebSockets serve. Now let's go back to our dashboard and let's refresh our page and let's try to connect. Now let's go back to our dashboard and let's refresh our page and let's try to connect. Now let's close the developer tools and you can see here we're connected. So these are some events that happened. So every time you connect to your WebSockets or you do anything relating to your WebSockets, let's go back to our terminal. You should be able to see it here. So there's a log for it here. Now let's go back to our website, and so far we can connect to our WebSocket server, but let's test out if we can send to our server. So in here, event creator, go ahead and add any name for the channel, add anything for the event, and for the data, make sure to add 2 curly brackets. So it must be like this. Now I'm going to send this. And actually, go ahead and open as well your developer tools and send a few requests. Now you can see here, this is pending and it's taking a very long time. Eventually it will time out and give us an error. And eventually you should be seeing this alert that's saying error sending event. Let's go ahead and click OK on this. And you want to take a look here. So you see we have a status 500 internal server error. So whenever this happens, you should be able to see this inside your log file as well. Judging from this error here, it's saying pusher error, failed to connect to this URL, API mt1 pusher.com. Now I can say here that the problem is, for some reason, our configuration file is not being read correctly for pusher. So let's go back to our code and we want to go to broadcasting.php. And here I have a mistake. So for the Laravel WebSocket host, it should be here, host. I forgot to change that and I left it as cluster. So that was not working. Let's go ahead and try again. Connect. And you can see it worked now. Let's send a few more and you can see our messages here. So far, we have set up our WebSocket server and we made sure it works using our own dashboard. Now we will create a new API so that we can connect to our WebSocket server. Let's go ahead and create a new controller file. So inside apps, you want to go to HTTP to controllers, and in here, let's create a new file and let's call it sockets controller. Now let's go ahead and create an empty class here. So we're going to use declare strict types. We're going to set that to 1. We're going to also add our namespace. And that was under app, HTTP, and controllers. And let's go ahead and, so let me just add the end of the line terminator there. And let's add our new class here. So let's call it sockets controller. And let's go ahead and create an empty method just to handle our connection. So we're going to call it connect. And we're going to need to use the request object from HTTP. So you need to make sure it's not the support one, the support facade. It's coming from the Illuminate HTTP. And let's go ahead and add our request. And just for now, let's just DD a message just for now. Now let's go ahead and create our API endpoint and point it to this controller. To create an API endpoint, we will need to add an entry inside our router file. So let's go to routes, and in here, let's go to API. Now to make this course a little bit more simple, we will not add any authorization or middleware, but you can always add your route inside middleware and require authentication. I'm gonna create a new post API. And let's say sockets/connect. That's gonna be our API endpoint. And we're gonna point that to our sockets controller. And the method was connect. Now let's go ahead and just test this route out, make sure it works. I'm gonna use Postman to send a request. If you don't have Postman installed, which I really recommend you install if you're getting into development, you can just switch your route to a get instead of a post, and you can just use your browser just for now. So our endpoint was socket/connect, and then there's the API. Let's add that here. So API/socket/connect, and so this would be the full URL. Let's go ahead and send this, and let's preview. So I can see that our controller is handling the request. Now let's go back to our controller file. Now let's go ahead and erase this line, and we're gonna have to create a new broadcaster. So to do that, we're gonna basically declare a new instance of Pusher broadcaster. And let's go ahead and add a parameter is gonna be a new Pusher instance as well. So that's going to be new Pusher. And if you don't see these in your autocomplete, you want to make sure that your IDE is actually showing you what you have inside your vendor. So it should be under vendor. If you scroll all the way down, you should have Pusher right here. And you should have another folder called Pusher Server SDK, source, and you should see your Pusher file, this one. The constructor, we expect four parameters actually. So we have the authentication key, which is let's go back to our env file, which is going to be our Pusher app key. And we have our secret, app ID, and our options. So let's go ahead and add all those here. And since these are coming from our env file, we can just use the env helper method. So let's just copy the app ID. And we need another one for, so the first one is going to be app key. The second one is app secret. The third one is app ID. And then for the last parameter, the options, we're just passing in an empty array. So now that we have our broadcaster instance created, let's go ahead and return a valid authentication response. So we're going to use our broadcaster. And let's return a valid authentication response. Now we're going to be creating our front end. So far, we have not modified our front end at all. So let's go ahead and do that. So we want to go to resources. And in here, you want to go to views. And this is the default Laravel page, which is this one here. Let's go ahead and delete this and create a new file. So we're going to create a new view, and let's call it chat app example .blade.php. And let's go ahead and modify our API route for that. So we're going to go to routes, web, and it should be this one here. So we want to return our chat app example route. And let's see if that worked. So let's refresh our page here. So now we're getting a blank page. Let's go ahead and create an empty HTML page. So we need an HTML tag. We're going to also need a head tag. And we're going to also need a body tag. All right. So inside the head, the first thing I'm going to do is add a title. And let's just say Laravel WebSockets Chat Example. Now I'm going to be adding the jQuery CDN. So let's go to Google and let's search for jQuery CDN. And let's go to the first result. And here, let's select the latest version, and we're gonna get the minified version. Let's copy this and let's paste it in our head tag. Now let's go ahead and grab Pusher CDN. So we're gonna search for Pusher CDN. And here, let's go to js.pusher.com. And in here, you wanna click on the last link here, the stable release in the docs. And go ahead and copy this script tag. Now we're gonna also need to add the Vue. So let's go and search for Vue2 CDN. And you should have a cdnjs.com, the result here. Let's go ahead and copy version. Let's grab version 2. The latest 2 version. That's going to be 2.6. And let's copy. And in here, make sure you copy the Vuemin.js. All right, now let's go ahead and grab Bootstrap 5 CDN. And it should be inside the first result. Let's copy the CSS. And let's copy the JS. So it should be this one here. Now let's go ahead and grab Pusher CDN. So we're gonna search for Pusher CDN. And here, let's go to js.pusher.com. And in here, you wanna click on the last link here, the stable release in the docs. And go ahead and copy this script tag. Now we're gonna also need to add the Vue. So let's go and search for Vue2 CDN. And you should have a cdnjs.com, the result here. Let's go ahead and copy version. Let's grab version 2. The latest 2 version. That's going to be 2.6. And in here, make sure you copy the Vuemin.js. All right, now let's go ahead and grab Bootstrap 5 CDN. And it should be inside the first result. Let's copy the CSS. And let's copy the JS. So it should be this one here. Now let's go ahead and create our body. So the first thing I want to do is create a new tag. Let's give it class container. And the ID app, this is for Vue. You don't have to use Vue. I'm just going to make life a little bit easier. All right. Now, before we do anything else, let's go ahead and create our Vue application. So we're going to add the script tag right on top of the ending tag for body. And I'm going to create a new Vue application. So we do that by writing new Vue, and we want to pass this an object here. So we will need to specify the element for the app, and the tag is ID app here. So let's grab that. And let's say we want to declare our data object. And for now, we don't have anything in there. And we have 2 methods that we want to work with. Mounted. And this will run once the app is mounted. And the methods. So this is where we can declare our functions. All right, now let's go ahead and create a new card. So we're going to use Bootstrap cards. So we're going to create a new div, card, margin top 4. Let's add our card header. This is where we're going to have the disconnect and connect buttons. And let's give it padding of 2. This is just for design. And let's add a new form here. Now inside the form, let's go ahead and add 2 more columns. So the first one is going to be, so let's say a column for the large screens. We want to have size 2. For the medium screens is going to be 3. For the small screens is going to be 12. Let's also add margin on the top and set the padding to 0. Now let's copy this and let's duplicate it. And let's format our file. So for the second one, I'm going to use column for the large. It's going to be 1. And let's set the medium to 2. And let's leave the small to 12 and leave the rest here. So for the first element, I'm going to add here a label. And let's say you want to write your name here. Then I'm going to be adding an input value. So let's say input class form control. This is bootstrap 5. Form control small to make a small input button here. And the placeholder, let's say name. And let's go ahead and just see how this looks in our browser. All right, so we have our name here. Let's add our connect and disconnect buttons. So here, I'm going to add a new button. So for the class, I'm going to add a margin on the right of 2. And I'm going to use a small button here. I'm going to use the primary for the connect. And let's give these with full width. So let's say connect. And let's copy this and add a new button under it. And let's call it disconnect. Let's see how that looks in our browser. All right. Let's just change the disconnect button to red. So I'm going to here say danger instead of primary. And let's see if that worked. All right. Let's go back to our code. Now let's go ahead and create some variables to capture our input. So inside our Vue app, we have data. In here, let's add 2 variables, connected. And I'm going to set this to false. And let's say name. And I'm going to set this to null. And let's go ahead and add these here. So for the name here, I'm going to add the v model, which is going to be name. And this will set our name variable to track the value inside this input. Now for the connect and disconnect, I don't want to display them at the same time. So inside the connected, we're going to add a case. So if vf, we're going to set it equal to if the connected, which is this variable here. If this is equal to true, then we actually, if this is equal to false, we want to display our connected button. If it is equal to true, we want to display our disconnect button. And let's just test this out quickly. And here, let's refresh. Now let's go ahead and add our onClick handlers for the connect and disconnect buttons. So inside our Vue app in methods, actually, this is a mistake. We should remove these. It's not a function, it's a variable. So let's go ahead and add a connect method. And let's add a disconnect method. Just for now, let's just set our connected variable. So we want to say this dot connected. We want to set it to true once we connect and to false once we disconnect. Now let's go ahead and call these methods once our buttons are clicked. So for the connect method, I'm going to say v-on click and set this to our method connect. And let's do the same thing for the disconnect. Let's copy this and paste it here. And let's just change the method name to disconnect. So let's go ahead and test this out. Let's refresh our page. Let's see. So you can see now this is changing. All right. So now we're going to build out the card body. This is where we're going to be placing all our message contents. So in here, under the card header, let's create a new tag. And the class is going to be card body. And we will add the title here. So let's add the h4 tag. And let's give this a margin. So margin top is going to be 4. And let's say the title is message. And let's go ahead and add a form under it. Before we build out the form, let's go ahead and build the area where we would see all the incoming messages. Before we actually do that as well, let's go ahead and create a new variable. So under data, we will create a new variable and let's call it message. And message is going to be an array. Now let's go ahead and give our message some values. So it's going to be an array of objects that will look like this. We're going to have the message. And the message is going to be, let's say, for example, your message for some value. And we're going to also have a name field. And we're going to have a time field. All right. So message is an array of objects. Now let's go ahead and display these messages. So on top of the title that we added for message in here, we're going to add a new column. And it's going to be full width. So column 12, we're going to use the background light on this one. And we're going to set the padding top to 2, the padding on the bottom to 2, and the margin on the top 3. And inside this container, we're going to add p tags. So to write our message in here. So the class is going to be, we're going to set the padding to 0, the margin to 0, and the padding for the start to 2, and the padding for the end to as well 2. So we want to use vo here, and we're going to say v4. And let's add this in quotations. So v4 message and index in incoming messages, or in message. What was the variable name that we declared here? Message. Let's actually change this to incoming messages. So we want to loop through this variable. This is the index. So let's say here is 1. This is the first array value. The second one would be 2. And the message is the actual value of each iteration. So it would be, for example, this object. And for each value in that array, we're going to display a p tag, and we're going to give it, we're going to actually display the value here. So let's say we're going to first display the time. So since we're using blade and view together, we have to actually use this symbol to connect to our variables in here. Otherwise, if you use something like this, then it will be interpreted as blade rather than view. So let's say message time. So message.time, we're indexing this variable here. So we're gonna also display in bold the name. So message.name. Then we're going to display also the actual message. So let's say message.message. And let's just quickly test this out on our browser. Let's refresh our screen, and we can see here we have a message. Now we're going to build the part where we actually can enter our message and send it. So under the card body here where we have our form, let's go ahead and add a new row in here. And we're going to give it margin 2 on the top. All right, so in here, we're going to add a region to display any errors. So we're going to say a new, we're going to create a new div here, and we're going to give it column 12. We're going to set the text color to white. And inside this one, we're going to add another div here, and we're going to give the background to red. So BG danger. And we're going to give the padding 2, and we're going to set the margin on the bottom as well to 2. All right. And let's go ahead and display here our errors. Just for now, we're going to add a static error. So let's say we're going to give it padding 0, margin 0, and the error, let's just say in bold. So let me close this tag. So in bold, we're going to say error, invalid message. And let's just go ahead and test this out. And you can see our error message is here. Now, there's just one more thing we need to do for this error tag. We're going to only show this when there is an error. So let's add a new variable under data. And let's just call it form error. And let's set it to false. So this is going to be a Boolean variable that will display the error once it's true. So inside here, under the row for the column 12, we're going to say vshow if the form error is true. Now, under the form error, we are going to add the region where we can write our message. So let's just close this. And here, let's start a new column. So let's say column 12. And let's add this tag here. And we're going to create also another div. And it's going to be for the form group. And under here, we're going to add a text area. And the placeholder, let's just say your message. For the class, let's give it form control. And let's also give it 3 rows by default. 3, and let's close this text area. Now let's just add a new variable to capture the value of this text area. So in here, under incoming messages, I'm just going to add message. And let's just set it to null. So in here, we're going to add vModel, which is going to be equal to the message. Actually, let's just add this to the very beginning, right before text holder. All right, let's just see how this looks. Now we just need to add the send button in here. So that's pretty easy. Let's close this rows here and let's add a new one. And we want to align the text here to the right, and let's give this margin top 2. So we're going to add 2 columns. So the first one is going to be on large screens. It's going to have a padding of 10, or it's going to have a width of 10. And our button is going to be on another column, which is going to be smaller. So it's going to have a size 2. So column large, forgot the dash here. And let's close this and add our button right here. And let's just say send event. All right. So for the button, we're going to assign it type button. And let's give it class btn small to make a small button. And let's set it to success to have a blue color. Or actually, let's keep it primary. It's going to be blue. Success is green. And let's give it full width. Let's see how that looks. All right. Let's actually make it green. Let's say success. All right. Let's see. All right. So now we're going to add a method where we can handle the onClick for here. So under methods, let's add a new one. And let's just say send event or send message. And for now, let's just set, once this is clicked, let's set the error to true. All right. And let's just try this out. Okay, looks like it's not showing. Oh yeah, we did not connect the method here. So let's just say, so now we're going to connect our method. So v on click, and we're going to set that to our send message function. Now let's just try this out. All right, I think I like the blue more, so let's just go back and change this to blue. So we're gonna change the success to primary. Now there is just two more things that we need to do to fix our front end and we'll be done. The first thing is we need to make this button smaller. I'm not sure why it's showing way too big. And we also need to display this area only when we are connected. So let's go back to our code. And if you look here where we added our button, this is supposed to be column 12, not CO. So I forgot to add an L. So that should fix the long column. And let's go ahead and comment out this message here because we're going to set this out once we receive a WebSocket connection. And let's go ahead and display this only when we're connected. So we're going to scroll up all the way to the card body. And let's minimize everything. And let's add a condition here. So it's going to be VF when we are connected. So when connected is equal to true. Let's try this out. Now let's go ahead and create our connect method here. But before we do that, we will need some variables so we can connect with our WebSockets. Let's go back to our web.php file inside our routes. And in here, we want to change our return. So we're going to add here beside the view, we're going to add variables. So we want to send all our pushing variables in here. We're going to add our port. And this is coming from our env file. If you remember, we created here our Laravel WebSocket host and port variables. So let's add them here. So we have our port. We have our host. Let's just change this name. Port. And we also need our new authentication endpoint. And if you remember, we created that inside our API file. It's this one, socket/connect. And let's just add the API prefix here. We also need to have our log channel. This is for this is coming from the Beyond Code Laravel package. And so you can just use a dashboard logger. And it's inside the Beyond Code Laravel WebSockets. And in here, we want to add our log channel prefix. Our last variable is we want to pass in our app. So we can grab that from our app service provider. So inside the function name here, let's use dependency injection to grab the app provider. And we want to use the Beyond Code app provider. So it's this one right here. Let's make sure the namespaces are correct. And here you can see they're both coming from the Laravel WebSocket package. And the name of this is called apps provider. And inside our variable here, let's pass in all our apps values. And that was actually called app provider. All right, that should be pretty much it. Let's go back to our chat application view. And from here, I'm going to actually open my web file on the right screen. So what we want to do is we want to create variables inside our script tag for our Vue application that will contain these values here. So I'm going to do it under connected. Let's go ahead and add our new variable. So we're going to have one for pusher. Let's set it to null. We're going to have one for app. And let's set this to null. We're going to also have one for apps. Let's set this to null as well. Actually, for this one, apps is coming from our web.php file. So we're going to use blade syntax to grab these variables. And that's going to look like this. And the variable name is apps. Let's actually copy this a few times. And we're going to add one variable for our log. So let's rename this to logs channel. We're going to need our auth endpoint. We're going to need our host. and we're gonna need our port. Now inside our mounted method, we wanna go ahead and initialize our apps variable. So we're gonna set the value of that to equal the first app inside our variable apps or null. All right, now we're ready to work on our connect method. So let's just close these screens. And for the connect method, let's erase this connection part. All right, so we're gonna use pusher. So we're gonna initialize our new pusher variable. And this is coming from the pusher package. We imported the CDN, if you guys remember, right here. So for the new pusher, the first thing we want to do is specify our app name. I'm just calling mine staging. And in here, we want to pass in some variables. So the first variable we're going to declare is our host. So let's initialize that. We're going to also do one for our port. And we want to also set the WSS port variable. Now we want to also set our display, or let's set our path first. So WS path, and that's going to be coming from our app variable. And we want to also disable stats, set this to true. And we're going to set our auth endpoint. And we're going to add some headers to our auth request. So we want to add, let me just fix this, headers. We want to add our XCSRF token to prevent cross script forgery. So CSRF dash token. And this is coming from, we're going to use blade syntax. And we want to also add our app ID. So we do that by writing xapp ID. And this is coming from our app. And the last thing we want to do is enable transports. We want to add WS. And let's also add flash. Now let's go ahead and handle our events. So if we were connected or disconnected, or there's an error or a state changed, Pusher provides us with events that we can use to handle those situations. So the syntax is going to go like this. We're going to use our pusher variable. We're going to use index something called connection, and we're going to bind a function to that. So the first one will be state change. And for now, let's just do nothing. So I'm just going to make an empty function here. And let's copy this and paste it 3 more times. So we have an event for state change. We have one for connected. We have one for disconnected. And we have one for error. For the error, I'm just going to change this to a variable because they provide us with a variable called event here. And here, let's use our state variable. So right now, let's work on these 3 quickly. So for the connected, if this is true, then we're going to set our connected variable to true. And for the disconnected, we're going to set our connect variable to false. And for the error, we're going to set our connect variable. Or let's just, we had I think an error variable. We called it, where is it? Form error. Set this to true. All right. Now for the state, let's go ahead and add a display to our user interface to show us what the current state is. So I'm going to make a new variable here. Let's call it state and set this to null. And inside this parameter here, I'm going to assign it this state value. So this dot state is equal to, and let's call this states actually, because it contains more than one. Let's say states, and let's say current state. Now let's go ahead and add this display right under our, let's just show you in the front end first. We want to add it right under the connect button here. So that was under the header. And here, let's add it right under the form. So it's going to be a div. And let's just leave it empty with no class. And in here, I'm going to add a p tag. And the p tag will contain the state. And let's check our front end now. Let's try to connect. Now, if you see this error, which is telling you that the apps variable that we declared and the apps variable that's coming from our Laravel backend is not a string, and we cannot assign it to a string. So what we have to do is we're going to go back to our code. And for the apps variable, we're just going to run JSON decode on it. So let's just change here. Let's remove the comma in the first bracket and add 2 exclamation points at the beginning and at the end. And in here, we're going to write JSON encode. And we're going to wrap our apps variable in here. And let's give this a try. Now, before we press connect, I'm going to open my developer tools. And let's go ahead and click connect. So if you see here, the request is pending. It's taking too long. This is eventually going to time out and not work. If you click on one of these requests, you see it says unavailable. So if you click on one of these requests and go to the header, you should see that it was connecting using WSS. It should be doing it with WS. The reason why WSS doesn't work is because we don't have it configured for our local environment. We cannot use IP addresses for that. You have to actually use real domain names. So let's go back to our code and let's fix that. So the first thing I want to point out is inside here, disable status. This is incorrect. It should be stats. So disable stats. And we're going to add a new variable. It's called force TLS, and we're going to set it to false. And let's give this a try. So now we are connected. Now there is just one more thing we need to fix. So right now we're connected, but we're not seeing our area where we can send our message. So let's go back to our code. And the reason is here, we used the connect variable, but we called ours connected. So let's just fix this typo quickly. So let's go ahead and give this a try. Let's just update the connected message here. And in here in the state, I'm just going to add this message. So channel's current state is, and the state. So let's refresh the screen and you can see this looks a little better. Now, before we can build the send event on our front end, we will need to create the backend first. So we will need to make a new API endpoint. Let's go back to our code editor, and in here, let's go to our routes file, and we want to go to web.php. So let's go ahead and just create a new API endpoint in here. And it's going to be a post request. And let's just give the route to be chat/send. And we're going to use the callback function to declare it. So we're going to grab 2 things. We will need the message. So if we go back to our front end here, we will need this message and we will need the name here. So the message is going to be coming from the request import method, and we're going to say message, and we're going to give it a default value of null. And let's do the same thing, but for the name. And let's give it a default value of anonymous. All right. So we're gonna also return the time. So we're gonna grab the current time of now. And we're gonna format this to UTC. All right. And if, let's add here a condition. So if name is equal to null, then we're going to initialize it with this value. Now, the reason why I have to do it here as well is because if you were to not include name in your API request, then it will initialize it here as anonymous. But if you sent it with null value, then this will actually be assigned to null. So this is why we have to do the check here. So once we grab the message, we will need to create a new event and dispatch that. And we will have our front end listen to this event and update our interface. So to create a new event, we're going to open up a code terminal. And in here, we're going to write PHP artisan, make event, and let's just call this send message. Now, once that's done, let's go ahead and go back to our code. And your new event file should be inside your app. You'll find here a new folder called events, and you should see send messages is right here. So for this event, I'm going to add 3 variables. One for name, and one for message, and the other one for time. And we will initialize these variables inside our constructor. And we will initialize our local variables here. Let's just copy this. All right. So we will need to create a new method in here. And let's say the method is going to be called broadcast with. And in here, we're going to return our variables, but in an array format. So we have our name. We have our message. And we have our time. Now, for the channel, we will need to create a new one for ourselves. So here, we're using the broadcast on. So this is what it will, where this event will be broadcasted. And in here, we're going to have to create a new channel. So let's erase this and let's go ahead and return new channel. And let's call this channel send message. Let's call it send message event. Now, to create this channel, we're going to go to our routes file. And here, we're going to go to channels. Let's go ahead and erase all this. And let's create our new channel. So we're going to have to write broadcast channel. And ours was called send message event. And we're going to have to declare a callback function here. And let's just, let me just remove the quotation from here and add it here. And in here, we're going to return our variables. So the same thing that we did here. Let's just copy this. Now let's go back to our web.php file and we want to dispatch our new event. So let's copy the send message here. And to create a new event, we simply want to write send message, dispatch. And in here in the parameters, we want to pass in the same values that we set inside our constructor. So name, message, and time. Now this event is going to be handled by our queue. So it's very important that you make sure that your queue is running. Let's go ahead now and build our send event in our front end. So we're going to go to our chat-app-example blade file. And let's scroll all the way down here. We have our send message function. So the first thing we want to do is we want to set the form error to false in here. And let's quickly check if our message is equal to null or empty. And this message is basically what we set for our input box, and we have it, I think, inside our variable here. So where is so we have message and we have name. Let me just group these together. So name can be empty, but message is required. So if message is not valid, we're going to set the form error to true. Else, we're going to send our post request, and we're gonna be using jQuery for this. So our endpoint was, let's go back to our web.php file. It was /chat/send. And we're going to handle this. So we're gonna first give it a few variables inside our header. We're gonna add the token, and this is going to be our CSRF token. We're going to also add our message. And we're going to add our name. All right. Now we're going to handle the case where if it failed, there is no response. We don't need to worry about the success case. But if it failed, we're just going to alert an error. All right, let's give this a try on our front end. Let's refresh. Let's connect. And I'm going to open developer tools here. And let's go ahead and send an event. And we have an error here. And it's saying undefined property date time. Let's go back to our web.php file. And let's see what's happening here. So here I made a mistake and I was supposed to call this inside the format method. All right, let's go back to our terminal and let's send the event again. And we can see that it worked. To make sure that this is actually working, we will need to check if our queue is actually sending the events. So let's open the terminal where we had our queue running, and you can see here there is no output. So this isn't really working. And let's double check why. So let's go back to our event class, send message. And in here, when we created this event class using the Laravel terminal, it did not create this class to implement the should broadcast feature. So let's go ahead and add it here. So we want to write implements should broadcast. Now let's go back to our website and let's try again. And let's go back to our terminal. And you can see here our apps send message is being processed. So on our front end, we will need to listen to this, and we will need to display the event once it's sent. Now let's go back to our front end code, and we want to scroll up to the connect method. And in here, let's scroll all the way down. And at the bottom, let us create a new method and call it. So let's call that method subscribe to all channels. And let's go ahead and create this method. So we're going to add it on the very first before the disconnect. And in here, we're just going to have an array, and we're going to run a for each statement for it. And inside the array, we're going to add our channel name that we want to subscribe to. So Beyond Code comes with one that's pre-built. It's called API message. Let's connect that to that. And let's go ahead and create another function, and let's call it subscribe to channel. And let's provide the channel name here. Let's go ahead and create this new function. Now here, the first thing I want to do is create a new instance for this. So let's do that here. And let's call the pusher subscribe method. So in here, in the first two parameters, we need to specify the log channel. And we did not pass the parameter, so we need to add channel here, channel name. And let's collapse this. And we want to run the .bind method. In here, we want to use the log message event. And for this, we will have a callback function, and it will give us a variable data. That's where we're going to get our event data from. So inside this function, we're going to have a check. So we're going to say if the data type is equal to the API message event. And inside the if statement, if the data details includes. So here we want to say if details, which is a variable inside the object data, includes our custom event here, our channel name, then we want to actually display this message to our UI. So what we're going to do is we're going to say let message data equal. So this is where we're going to parse our message data. So I recommend you guys run a console log here on data. So let me just fix this here. And you should be able to see what this actually looks like. Well, I'm going to just leave this commented out, and let's go ahead and grab our time as well. So let UTC date equal to new date, and we have the message data, and let's grab time from there, and let's convert it to the user current time. I think it's a to locale string. All right, and let's go back to the top here, scroll up, and we called ours incoming message. So we want to just remove this, and let's go ahead and push this into here. So we're going to use our instance variable here, the inst. We're calling our incoming messages. We're going to push our values in here. So we're going to push the message data. Now let's go ahead and give this a try. Let's see if it's working on our front end. Let's refresh the page. Let's connect. And let's send an event. And you can see it's working. I'm just going to change the send event to send message. So in here, let's find send event. And this is our button here. Let's change it to send message. And let's refresh, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys liked this tutorial. If you found this tutorial useful, I would greatly appreciate it if you guys hit that like button. And if you have any questions, yeah, leave it in the comment below. We'll see you on the next tutorial.